Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. I loathe the current state of my existence. My wife embodies traits of a shrew, and unfortunately, my daughter seems to have inherited them. Disappointed by my refusal to confront this reality, my son departed as soon as he reached adulthood, unwilling to be a part of our dysfunctional dynamic. My daughter, influenced by her mother's behavior, willingly embraced similar patterns, leaving me feeling sorry for her unsuspecting husband. Likely before our first anniversary, Wendy possessed an overinflated sense of attractiveness, perpetually engaging in flirtations to uphold her self-perception. However, her actions extended beyond mere flirtation, as she saw no issue in engaging in extramarital affairs, so long as I remained oblivious. Yet, I was always aware. For 26 years, I endured this knowledge in silence, explaining perhaps why my son felt compelled to escape. The lingering question persists: why did I endure? Regrettably, I find myself unable to furnish a compelling response. While I harbored disapproval for my wife's conduct, I lacked the resolve or bravery to confront her. She tended to the essentials, preparing meals, ensuring clean clothes, and maintaining a tidy home. Despite her constant nagging and disagreeable demeanor, I grew adept at tuning it out, convinced I had no alternative. Regrettably, I embodied mediocrity, a receding hairline, bifocals, and an extra 20 pounds, mostly concentrated around my midsection. Trapped in a stagnant job for 26 years, my career prospects dwindled as younger, more driven individuals surged ahead. My employment merely sustained our basic needs, with no savings, retirement prospects, or property to call our own. Our future loomed as dim as our past, a relentless cycle of frustration and inertia. Truly, life feels utterly dismal. Wendy managed to maintain herself better than I did. She diligently exercised and watched her weight, seemingly for the purpose of attracting other men. To be fair, Wendy wasn't brazenly pursuing multiple men for casual encounters. Her affairs were discreet, typically involving only one man at a time, and perhaps only one or two different individuals each year. Whether the relationships fizzled out or she ended them, I remained indifferent. At least she had the decency not to bring them home. I, on the other hand, never entertained the idea of straying. Despite occasional advances from other women, I dismissed them with a chuckle, convinced they would be disappointed if I reciprocated. It all seemed like too much hassle. My daughter Jane settled for a meek husband, much like myself. Perhaps she saw in him a reflection of her own father. Shortly after their wedding, they welcomed twin daughters, adorable but bearing the weight of familial patterns that seemed destined to repeat. It was a regrettable prospect. The brightest aspect of my life was my rapport with my secretary, Alice, and our company's male clerk, George. Although Alice officially managed 6 representatives, I felt she gave me preferential treatment. George, with his sunny disposition, was a beacon of positivity in my day-to-day. He never grumbled and always wore a smile. While I couldn't discern his career aspirations, he appeared content with his work. Alice and George shared a camaraderie in the office, exchanging gossip and jokes. I found solace in their presence, a refuge from the turmoil at home with my wife. Despite working alongside Alice for 13 years, I remained largely unaware of her personal life. The only salient details I knew were her single status and her apparent dislike for my wife, although I never probed into the reasons behind either. One day, my daughter Jane burst into my office, her face alight with urgency. She eagerly shared news about enrolling her twins in a scoliosis research study. It turned out both girls had slight spinal curvatures, sparking Jane's deep concern. With genetic scoliosis being hereditary, several organizations had allocated significant resources to investigate its transmission across generations. Jane meticulously outlined the potential implications, including its effects on the heart and other potentially life-threatening medical conditions. As part of the study, researchers were scrutinizing the genetic backgrounds of participating families. Jane proudly handed me a small padded envelope containing a plastic bottle and detailed instructions. It was a departure from my expectation of cheek swabs. I was to provide a saliva sample by spitting into the bottle and sealing it. The envelope was prepaid and pre-addressed, requiring nothing more than following the provided instructions. Grateful for my cooperation, Jane left with a smile, leaving me to contemplate the significance of our participation in this crucial research endeavor. Alice breezed into my office with a fresh cup of coffee, using the pretext to pry into my affairs. What did the spawn of the devil want? She quipped. She's enrolled the kids in some scoliosis study and needs my DNA. Try not to be too harsh about my wife, I replied, defending Wendy despite Alice's evident disdain. I thought you did those DNA tests 4 or 5 years ago, Alice recalled. I did, but they're unaware. I just wanted to ensure the kids were mine before updating my will, I explained, noticing Alice's enjoyment in ridiculing Wendy whenever she got the chance. I can understand why that would be a concern, Alice remarked with a grin. Well, don't keep me in suspense. Are you the father or not? Jane and Oscar are both my children. What more can I say? I responded. With luck like that, you should play the lottery, Alice joked. There's nothing wrong with Oscar. He was just fed up with the whole situation and pissed that his dad didn't make it right. I interjected, urging Alice to tone down her insults toward Wendy. Sorry, boss, I just can't help myself. Are you going to pee in the bottle? Alice teased. It's spit, Alice. They want me to spit in the bottle. I corrected her just as George walked in with the day's mail and memos. Alice's eyes lit up. George, baby, you're just in time. Martin needs you to spit in this bottle for him. I sensed George's surprise mirrored my own at Alice's unexpected suggestion. Suddenly, participating in the study seemed more intriguing. Handing George the vial, Alice and I observed as he carefully contributed his DNA. The label says Martin Davis, George remarked. I don't mind helping out as long as you two keep me out of trouble. No worries, George. Martin and I have got your back, Alice assured him, dropping the vial into the envelope and sealing it. I'll make sure this gets in the mail today, boss, she declared, departing with a beaming smile. George looked slightly bewildered. You know she's sweet on you, Mr. Davis, George remarked. What? I was taken aback by George's observation. Alice often speaks highly of you, and I've noticed her stealing glances when you're not looking, George confided in me one day. She's even mentioned a few times that she wishes you weren't married. I had always considered Alice and me as friends, never entertaining the idea of a different kind of relationship. George's words, however, flattered me, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought. Perhaps Alice could indeed be a better companion than Wendy. It occurred to me that I needed to pay closer attention to the dynamics unfolding around me. Thanks for the insight, George. I'll catch up with you later this afternoon, I said, feeling a newfound awareness settling in. Over the following weeks, life continued as usual, albeit with a heightened awareness of Alice's presence prompted by George's words. It struck me as peculiar that my secretary held me in higher regard than my wife ever did. For the first time in my marriage, the idea of divorce crept into my mind. My usual complacency towards my marital situation began to wane as I found solace in Alice's kindness. On Friday afternoons, I often made a habit of leaving work a bit early, a routine I had adopted years ago. Without facing any objections, arriving home, I settled into my favorite armchair, only to overhear a heated argument between my wife and daughter emanating from the kitchen. They were unaware of my presence, allowing me to eavesdrop on their conversation. No, Jane, I have no clue who it could be. I was certain it was your father. Wendy's voice rang out. My father. Damn it, Mom, this isn't my father, Jane retorted, her frustration palpable. I surmised she had received the DNA results she was holding. I don't know who my father is. And to make matters worse, my own mother has no idea either. Their conversation was interspersed with mumbling and confusion as they spoke over each other, but I managed to grasp some of the dialogue. They can't even put a name to this DNA sample. It's not in any database whatsoever. If you can't help me, who the hell can? Jane's assertive tone as she confronted her mother brought a smirk to my face. Payback indeed. Though I wished I could catch every word, I had to settle for just a fragment of their conversation. For the next few minutes, their voices faded into indistinct murmurs. The last snippet I caught was about another test scheduled for Tuesday morning, followed by the sound of the door slamming shut as Jane stormed out. Sooner or later, I knew I'd have to disclose the truth, but for now, I relished in the moment. It was undoubtedly the most thrilling part of my week. I anticipated Alice's excitement when I recounted the events on Monday. The only downside was having to wait until then to share the news. After dinner, Wendy announced her plan to visit a friend dealing with personal issues, giving me the perfect excuse to pay a visit to Alice. Martin, what the hell are you doing here? You should have phoned first. I look like crap, Alice exclaimed upon seeing me. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I thought you might want to hear how your little trick with the DNA sample panned out, I replied. Despite her casual appearance in sweatpants and a pullover shirt, Alice looked surprisingly attractive without makeup. It dawned on me that I had never truly noticed her beauty before, despite seeing her every day at work. Want coffee or a beer? Alice offered. I'll take a beer, but if I have more than 3, I won't be able to drive home, I replied. No problem. I'll make sure there are at least 4 in the fridge, maybe 6, Alice said with a suggestive tone. 6 beers and I'll be out like a light, I joked. Don't worry, I've got a big bed, Alice teased, sending a clear signal. Damn, Alice was making advances, but that wasn't why I came over. I just wanted to share the situation between my wife and daughter. Yet it seemed Alice had other ideas, even if I was drunk. I'm not much of a drinker, so I usually can't handle much. We began with light-hearted banter about the DNA test results, sharing laughs over the outcome. However, as the evening progressed, our conversation took various twists. and turns. After 3 hours and a few too many beers, I found myself feeling quite buzzed. Alice, concerned for my safety, persuaded me not to drive home. Eventually, we ended up in bed together. That night, I experienced my first blowjob in 8 years, and I eagerly reciprocated. We made love 2 more times before the morning light filtered through the curtains. When I returned home, Wendy was still asleep in bed. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. The next thing I knew, my wife was shaking me awake, bringing me back to reality. "What are you doing down here? Go up, take a shower. And if you're still hungover, use the bed. If you're going to go out drinking, at least learn how to do it properly," Wendy scolded me. Wendy couldn't fathom that I had spent the night with another woman. Instead, she assumed I had gone out drinking, stumbled home drunk. I found the whole situation uproarious. I knew I would be repeating the experience more often from then on. Since it was Saturday, there were chores to be done. Lawn mowing, car washing. I spent the entire day working and felt invigorated. It was as if a whole new world had opened up to me. I realized I no longer needed to resign myself to a life of humiliation and nagging. Imagining life without Wendy was effortless, while picturing a future with Alice came naturally. I resolved that the next time I saw her, I'd limit myself to no more than 2 beers. As much as I wished the weekend would continue indefinitely, Monday eventually arrived. Alice greeted me with a radiant smile, looking better than ever. We agreed to maintain a composed demeanor around the rest of the staff. Our efforts seemed successful until George walked in, with his uncanny intuition. He sensed a shift between me and Alice immediately. He didn't say a word but grinned broadly at us. We returned the smile, confirming his suspicions. To brighten his day, no one else in the office seemed to have a clue. After decentering the conversation between Wendy and Jane, I anticipated something significant happening on Tuesday morning. So, I asked Alice to have George spit into one of the small cups from the drinking fountain. Carefully, I stashed the unappealing cup in the top left drawer of my desk, fashioning makeshift funnel by pinching its sides. At around 10 o'clock, Wendy arrived unexpectedly, or so she thought. Alice courteously ushered her into my office, leaving the door ajar. "Again, there was an issue with the DNA sample you provided Jane 2 weeks ago. She needs another one. I brought a bottle with me. Would you mind?" Wendy inquired. "Of course not. What happened with the last one? It didn't seem that complicated," I responded. "I'm not entirely sure, but somehow the sample got contaminated and was unusable. It'll just take a moment," Wendy explained as she handed me the bottle, waiting for me to provide a new sample. Just then, Alice popped her head in. "Wendy, if you have your parking ticket, I can validate it for you." As Wendy fumbled through her purse, passing the ticket to Alice, I swiftly filled the bottle from the cup, avoiding any eye contact. With Wendy's attention momentarily diverted, I smoothly screwed the lid onto the bottle and handed it back to her. I had to admit, it looked as though I had indeed provided a fresh sample. "Here you go," Alice said, handing Wendy the validated ticket before returning to her desk. Wendy smiled as she accepted the bottle, dropping it into the envelope. The clutter inside my desk drawer didn't bother either of us. We spent the afternoon laughing like carefree kids. Alice didn't mind helping me tidy up the mess. In the following weeks, Alice and I met up several times, but we never stayed overnight together. Meanwhile, Wendy started to suspect that I was spending too much time at the local bars. I didn't bother correcting her assumption. Sometimes, when I was with Alice, we just talked or watched a movie without any intimacy. But when we did indulge, it was always enjoyable. I made sure to have a couple of beers before heading back home to Wendy. One Wednesday morning, my son-in-law, Carl Taylor, unexpectedly showed up at my office. "Martin, I need your help. I'm at my wit's end. Jane and your wife have turned our home into a battleground," he confessed anxiously. "Whoa, hold on a second, Carl. What's going on? What kind of battle are we talking about here?" I inquired, quietly turning on the intercom so Alice could listen in. Carl seemed jittery, clearly uncomfortable bringing up the subject with me. We had never really had a heart-to-heart conversation before, and he always seemed a bit reserved. I didn't want to discourage him, so I encouraged him to elaborate. "They've been arguing non-stop about the DNA tests Jane needs for the scoliosis study. Thank goodness I'm at work most of the day," he explained. "Can you give me more details?" I asked, keeping my voice calm as I glanced at the intercom, knowing Alice was listening in. "I'm not certain, but it seems that neither of the DNA samples you provided match with Jane's or the twins. This has deeply upset Jane. She always believed you were her biological father, and now she's uncertain. If this is a sensitive topic for you, Mr. Daddies, just let me know and I'll stop. I assumed you were aware of some of this," Carl explained hesitantly. "Don't worry about it, Carl. I'm interested in understanding what's going on. I hate to admit it, but I've had some suspicions myself over the years, I responded, fabricating a lie to ease his discomfort. Jane pressured Wendy to get DNA samples from 3 other men, but none of those samples matched up either. Naturally, Jane was furious. She accused her mother of promiscuity, suggesting she'd slept with so many men she couldn't remember their names. Wendy was in tears the other day. Carl continued. That sounds pretty rough, Carl. Do you happen to know who these 3 men are? I asked. Sure. Carl retrieved a piece of paper from his folder and handed it to me. Glancing at it briefly, I recognized 2 of the names. The worst part, Mr. Davis, is that Jane never asked me to provide a sample for the tests. From their conversations, I gathered it involved spitting in a bottle. But I never did that. I saw some papers indicating my DNA and stating I'm the twins' father, but I never gave a sample. Something doesn't add up, Carl concluded. I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of the situation. Here I was attempting to deceive them about being Jane's father, while Jane was concealing the fact that Carl wasn't the father of the twins. My daughter's deceitfulness rivaled her mother's. I felt sorry for Carl, but in a way, he was in the same predicament as I was. Carl, are you happy in your marriage to my daughter? I asked. I think I've made a huge mistake, but I don't know what to do about it, Carl admitted. Look at me, Carl. I made the same mistake 26 years ago, and did nothing about it. Do you want to end up like me? I pressed. Carl remained silent, knowing the answer but reluctant to vocalize it for fear of hurting my feelings. What is it you need from me, Carl? I inquired. I suppose nothing. I just needed someone to talk to. You always seemed like a sensible man. If you have any ideas, please let me know, Carl replied. I pondered for a moment, then leaned over my desk, locking eyes with my son-in-law. Run, Carl, run. It was hard to gauge Carl's emotions as he rose, smiled, and shook my hand. It seemed I wouldn't be seeing him for a while. I wished him well. Alice, you're right, I confessed, feeling the weight of her words. I'm the biggest hypocrite. I can't offer advice to Carl when I can't even follow it myself. I wish I had someone like me to talk to. I conceded, feeling a pang of guilt. Talk to me. I'll offer you the same advice you gave to Carl. I've observed you for the past 13 years, and I've never understood why you allowed yourself to be treated poorly by that woman. If there was ever a good time for you to take action, it's now. Martin Davis, you have 1 week to make a decision, or I'm out of here, Alice declared sternly. It was the first time she'd ever slammed my office door, and it left me with the distinct impression that she meant business. Felix Robinson and James Allen were 2 friends of the family, although now I realize they all right. Martin, who are these guys on the list your son-in-law gave you? I slid the piece of paper across the desk to her. 2 of them are old family friends, and the 3rd guy I have no idea. What do you want to do about it? She pressed. Would it upset you if I said I didn't want to do anything? I responded. Yes, it would. I don't expect you to seek vengeance or anything, but I do expect you to get off your backside and take action. After 13 years, I finally got you to notice me, and I don't intend to regress. If you don't come up with something, I will, Alice declared firmly. Dinner that night was tense. It was clear that Wendy was bothered by something, but she didn't share it. We stumbled through the meal with minimal conversation, which was actually an improvement from our usual exchanges. Surprisingly, she had no snide remarks when I excused myself to head down to the bar. This time, I actually went and ended up getting thoroughly drunk. The next morning at work seemed normal until George walked in. He dropped the mail on Alice's desk and then handed me a brochure. The expression on my face must have prompted an explanation. I gave one to Alice too. Since you both enjoy traveling, I thought you might be interested in this, he said, wearing his usual grin as he exited my office. As I glanced at the pamphlet, a smile crept onto my face. It advertised a 4-week tractor-trailer driver's course that leads to a commercial driver's license. Alice walked in, stifling a chuckle, holding the same course information. Where does George come up with this stuff? I asked. That's not fair, Martin. I don't think it's nonsense. In fact, I find it intriguing. Alice countered. You must be joking. I can't picture either of us doing this, let alone both of us, I replied incredulously. But I can, and I think I look pretty good in jeans, she retorted. You do, but what does that have to do with anything? I questioned. Well, I can't exactly wear a skirt while driving a big red can I, she quipped with a grin. The conversation with Alice stretched on for nearly an hour until she eventually persuaded me. We both took the afternoon off, and within 2 hours, we were signed up for the Lehigh Institute Driver's School. With plenty of accumulated vacation time and sick leave, we could complete the course and still retain our jobs if it didn't pan out. That evening at home was anything but pleasant. Carl had left Jane for reasons unknown, and while I felt a sense of pride in the boy, Wendy seemed to hold me accountable for his departure. Without confirming or denying her suspicions, I made my way to the local bar. Later, I ended up at Alice's place, only returning home to find Wendy already in bed. Over the next few days, work kept us busy. Alice had to train a temporary worker to cover her absence, while I juggled my workload to ensure everything was managed. Alice even arranged for me to meet with a divorce lawyer, accompanying me to the appointment. I didn't reveal the reasons for the divorce, but the lawyer did inquire about the names Carl had mentioned. I informed Wendy that I would be working remotely for the next few weeks, to which she seemed indifferent. Our proximity to the school made our daily commute convenient. Then, on a stormy night, Alice and I found ourselves sharing our first motel room instead of risking the drive home. The 4 weeks of training flew by. While I excelled in driving skills, Alice surpassed me in backing up and parking maneuvers. Nonetheless, we both earned our commercial driver's licenses, CDLs, and received several enticing job offers. To celebrate, we treated George to dinner at the Outback that night. The more time I spent with Alice, the more I found myself wanting to be with her. I hadn't realized how enjoyable companionship could be, and I regretted not making a move like this sooner. During dinner that evening, I casually inquired about the progress of the scoliosis study, partly to provoke Wendy. However, her reaction caught me off guard. Instead of erupting in anger, she quietly excused herself from the table and left the room. An hour later, she mentioned she had to visit a sick friend. As she headed out the door, I decided it was time for me to visit a friend as well. It wasn't the smoothest transition, but a week later, Alice and I found ourselves behind the wheel for one of the largest freight hauls out of Carlisle, PA. I departed quietly, slipping away like a thief in the night without ever confronting my wife. The divorce papers arrived the following day. Moving my belongings into Alice's home, George readily agreed to watch over the place and handle mail forwarding in exchange for rent-free living. Spending our days together, Alice and I surprisingly found harmony without getting on each other's nerves. While disagreements may arise in the future, for now, things are going smoothly. Although we're not planning on having children, if we do, I hope they won't suffer from scoliosis. Carl vanished without a trace. Jane, due to circumstances, had to move in with her mother. And from what I've heard, things aren't going well for her. A few months later, Alice and I visited Oscar in Colorado, and our relationship was stronger than ever. It seemed he was relieved to see me finally taking decisive action. He and Alice hit it off effortlessly. To set things right, Oscar pledged to disclose the truth about the DNA tests to Wendy and Jane when he returned home for Christmas. Second story, my partner cheated a year ago and I still can't forgive him even if we're still together. Hi, I and my BF are together for almost 3 years now and everything about our relationship was perfect until I went to university to pass an exam to enter to medical school. So, a year goes by and we see each other at least twice a week to have dinner together, etc. But I always suspected a different behavior when he mentioned his new girlfriend. Let's name her Charlotte. I was quite worried, but he was such a sweetheart that I couldn't believe he would do that to me. May 2023. Anyway, at the end of my exam he confessed to me he cheated. He literally told me he just kissed her in a club 2 weeks before and nothing ever happened since. They're simply good friends. It was hard to process. But I chose to work things out this situation because I know I was distant because of my hard studies. Now that I knew I was on edge every day, I forbade him from seeing his group of friends because I knew she would be there. He began to hide things from me because he knew I would get upset. Sometimes, he would eat with her face to face and invite her to play at his house without telling me. But nothing happened. It felt like micro-cheating to me. As a month went by, I became more and more unstable and started to act like the crazy girlfriend. I tried hacking into his accounts, stalking her, and even wrote a breakup letter because I was so angry about the situation. I gave it to him one night after we argued for the 100th time that week. He had canceled our plans to hang out with his group, refused to block her, and she had sent him explicit TikToks which he had liked. It was such a disrespect to me. That night, he read the letter and then left me alone to find his friends. June, after that he tried all his best to make me feel happy. He apologized, swore he would never restart, invited me to restaurant. But I saw he planned to go to her party one weekend, and when I asked he said he was doing something with his parents. We argued, he excused. Then summer vacation arrived and we planned to see some friends together. At that time he was very sweet. I literally saw nothing coming. But I remember a weird gut since 1 week, since we didn't see each other from one night because I was celebrating the result of my exam with some friends, and so we didn't see each other that night. Anyway, the feelings of disgust didn't seem to dissipate, so I messaged Charlotte, asking her to tell me the truth because I felt like he hadn't told me everything. Suddenly, it felt like I was falling from a great height. She confessed that it wasn't just a kiss, she had invited him to her place. They had engaged in foreplay. He wanted to go further, but she refused. They kissed again at the club. She admitted that a week ago, on that same night, she had slept at his place. However, she claimed they only kissed, watched a movie together, and didn't share the same bed or hook up. I went to my boyfriend's place and grabbed a pair of scissors, cutting up every piece of clothing I could find. It was all too much to handle. When he arrived, I saw a flood of texts on his phone. He told her he loved her, that he would choose her if she stayed in France for her studies, and so on. It was heart-wrenching to witness. All these messages were sent the day before. That same night, I cried myself to sleep in his arms. July, August, I broke up and we spent summer vacation apart because he had to go on some competition in another country. He was all alone. I blocked him, but we talked sometimes this summer. At the same time, I met a kind boy and wanted to fall in love for him. But I was still deeply in love with my BF. At the end of summer, my BF surprised me with flowers and went to my new study city. And I fell for it, and rejected Nathan. September. A month passed and I receive a message from Charlotte who told me they saw each other and he apparently kissed her again. He told me that he in fact saw her to make things clear, but the rest was all made up. She told me he was going to see her in Spain. I let it pass too. Then he blocked her from everywhere and seemed very upset. In an act of recenter, when I met a guy at a party I hooked up with even if I was with my BF. It was just a one-night stand, but I just wanted my BF to suffer like I did. October, I was losing my mind remembering all of that and took his phone and messaging her that I loved her and wanted her to explain the exact situation between us, and she told me the exact same thing. Except that I got discovered and it made them talk to each other a bit, but he blocked her after. In December, I asked him if they talked again. He told me yes. Apparently she wanted to see him again and he answered he couldn't because he was with me that day. February 2024. Now we are still together and nothing happened. He loves me and I can see it, but I don't know if we share the same feeling anymore. I feel disgust when he touches me when I am not in the mood. I can't tell him I love him anymore by all of my heart. I won't be fully happy anymore because every day I remember that betrayal and at what point it left scars in me. I am still talking to other guy to find attention by other, but I think it's just pushing me even deeper. I love him, but I can't imagine having my life being torture like that. And at the same time I can't breaking up. I was so depressed on summer. I don't have many friends besides him. My friends group was his first, so I would lose them all. And I don't know what to do. I don't want to be alone, but I just can't trust him anymore. Him or anyone else right now. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon. Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. Travis, where are you? We need to have a conversation. My wife's voice echoed through the house as she entered through the front door, accompanied by another presence. Aware of my presence due to my car parked in the driveway, she sought me out. I'm upstairs. I'll be down momentarily, I responded, hastily closing the suitcase sprawled out on the bed. Why are you home so early? She inquired upon entering the bedroom, her gaze falling on the packed suitcase. And why are you packing? Oh, I received a call from a potential client. There's an urgent matter, so I left work to prepare. I have to catch a flight in a couple of hours. I apologize for not informing you earlier, but this opportunity arose suddenly. I need to act fast before it slips away, I explained. Ah, I see. Well, I hope you can spare a few minutes because I really need to talk to you, she said, her tone serious. Of course, I have some time, I assured her, grabbing my suitcase and following her downstairs. We proceeded into the kitchen and settled around the table. To my surprise, another man was present, Mike Robinson, a lawyer from the firm where my wife worked. Recognizing her familiar presence, I poured myself a cup of coffee that had been brewed earlier and settled into my seat. Without preamble, she dropped a bombshell. Mike and I have developed feelings for each other. I no longer love you, and I want a divorce. We've already initiated the paperwork. And here's your copy. Despite the shock, I remained composed, absorbing her words with a calm demeanor. All right, I replied evenly, processing the information. I don't see the point in resisting. If it's over between us, then it's over. Can I take a look at the paperwork? It's better to expedite things. As she mentioned an upcoming trip that might prolong the process, I considered the practicalities. Perhaps Mike could arrange for a notary to finalize everything before I depart, I suggested, acknowledging the need for efficiency. Surprisingly, she commended my maturity in handling the situation, expressing relief at avoiding a heated confrontation. I apologize for blindsiding you like this, she admitted. But I agree it's best to address it head-on and move forward. Resigned to the reality of the situation, I agreed to review the paperwork. Let's take a look at the details, I responded thoughtfully, scanning the division of assets and contemplating the implication. I pondered, noting a particular aspect. Regarding spousal support, I'm curious about that. You have a decent job yourself. Why are you requesting $2,000 a month? I questioned. We researched it and calculated based on our incomes. You actually earn about 4 times what I do, so the court's formula arrived at that figure, she explained. I see. The only concern I have is that there are significant changes looming within my company. I'd prefer not to revisit court proceedings to renegotiate this. How about we modify it to a fair percentage of my income? Let's say 25%. That should actually give you more, considering my last paycheck, and it'll adjust automatically with changes in my salary, I suggested. Wow, that's incredibly generous of you, and it's definitely a smart move. Okay, Mike will make that adjustment and we'll all initial it, my wife acknowledged, a sense of gratitude evident in her voice. Well, you've given me an amazing 10 years, so it's only fair to reciprocate. Now about your request for 60% ownership of the business. Considering you're not involved in its day-to-day operations, I'm hesitant to relinquish control. How about we adjust that to 49%? After all, I'm the driving force behind its success. We can amend the investment split to give you 80% of the current investments. I'm confident I can rebuild what I'm sacrificing, I proposed. All right, that sounds fair to me. As long as I can keep the house. I adore this place, she insisted. I'm okay with that. In fact, I'll be so engrossed in work that I won't have time for our beach house. I'm not much of a beach person anyway. How about we rephrase it to state that I'll transfer my share of all our current properties? I suggested. I might just opt for a low-maintenance condo somewhere. Travis, I'm truly amazed by your generosity, she remarked. Well, like I said, I'll be too preoccupied to fully enjoy the properties, and I'm confident I can rebuild my portfolio, I assured her. All right, let's discuss child support. Personally, I think the amount specified here is a bit low, and there's no provision for adjusting it as my income increases. I want to ensure that my kids are well provided for. How about we amend this to state that 25% of all my income in this country goes towards child support? This way, it not only covers my earnings from work but also any other income I receive from investments here. Additionally, since you'll be the custodial parent, it makes sense for them to be on your insurance, I suggested. Okay, that sounds reasonable. I'll have David log on to the WIFI and print out the new documents. We can sign and notarize them. Then David can take them down to get filed, she agreed. Thank you, Travis. You've handled this situation with a lot of maturity. And I appreciate it, my wife acknowledged gratefully. The documents were printed, the notary arrived, and we signed the papers. I grabbed my suitcase and headed off to the airport. 1 month had passed and the sound of my ringtone stirred me from a light dose on the sandy shores of Cabo. Without needing to glance at the caller ID, I knew exactly who was on the other end of the line. Hello, Angelina. What brings you to call me today? Was my generosity insufficient? I quipped, answering the call on speaker to spare myself from holding the phone to my ear. You deceitful scoundrel. You despicable jerk. I don't know how you pulled it off, but you won't get away with this. Angelina's voice seethed with anger. Why? Whatever could you be referring to, my dear? I responded with feigned innocence. Don't play dumb with me. There's a truck parked outside this house and the deputy sheriff is here serving eviction papers. Well, naturally, the previous owners would require you and your boyfriend to vacate the premises before they can take possession. I explained calmly, but you transferred the house to me. Who are these new owners you speak of? I am the rightful owner. Angelina protested vehement. Well, technically speaking, that's not entirely accurate. What I transferred to you were the properties we owned at the time the divorce papers were finalized. However, by that point, we hadn't owned any property for over 3 months. And since your name wasn't on the deeds, I didn't require your signature to sell them. Even the beach house. Angelina's voice trembled with disbelief. I did mention I wasn't much of a beach person, didn't I? I replied matter-of-factly. You heartless bastard. Where are you? We need to meet to finalize the paperwork so I can claim my share of the company. Well, about that, I hesitated, bracing for her reaction. You didn't. Angelina's tone dropped to a whisper filled with dread. About 6 months ago, actually. I've only been managing it for the new owners on a salary until they got settled. Truth be told, I stopped working there altogether a week prior to our last conversation. Then that means. Angelina trailed off, realization sinking in. No salary means no maintenance, I confirmed, feeling a pang of guilt despite myself. But what about the kids? You promised you'd take care of them. Angelina's voice quivered with concern. Absolutely not. What I meant was that I'm committed to looking after my own children. Since I'm not their biological father, I don't feel any obligation to care for them. You might want to discuss financial support with Deborah and Joseph. They're actual parents. Deanna plays quite a role, doesn't it? Well, at least I've got my savings and investments. She trailed off as my laughter became uncontrollable. Let me guess, she sighed. That's all vanished, too. I've actually moved all of that into the offshore account I established after selling the business. Good luck tracing any of it. We'll let the court decide on that matter. Best of luck with that. I provided everything precisely as stipulated in the documents you signed and had notarized. You received 49% of all the businesses I owned at the time of signing. You received all the property we owned at the time of signing. You received your share of my income at the time of signing. The child support is precisely 20% of my income in the United States of America. It's not my responsibility if you never bothered to verify whether I still owned a business, had any property, or actually had income at that time. I never claimed any of those things. You're receiving exactly what you're entitled to. What do you mean? I supported you and was your wife for 10 years. I deserve more than nothing. Are you serious? You've been cheating on me for at least the past 5 years. The moment I left, you moved your latest fling in. You're unfaithful and you deserve nothing. Oh, and I've filed a lawsuit against your company too. Turns out they have a morality clause in their employee handbook that prohibits affairs between co-workers. Those videotapes I sent of you getting intimate in the conference room should ensure both of you get fired. Moreover, the ethics committee is probing him because they somehow got evidence of him engaging in a sexual relationship with a client while representing her. He could end up disbarred because of that. It's quite a predicament, considering he won't simply be able to jump to another or open his own after being fired. Darn, I need to reach David. Don't bother, he won't pick up. What do you mean? I've heard he was the victim of a violent mugging. He's probably in an ambulance on his way to Mercy General right now. Maybe it's time for you to consider finding a new boyfriend. Oh my goodness, not even close. Although the Latina beauty line next to me right now often says the same thing, usually while we're both naked. The call ended shortly after. My Latina companion woke from her nap and suggested we return to the enclosed cabana, where clothing was optional. I had rewarded her with this trick for keeping me informed about my wife's activities. She had called earlier to inform me that the divorce papers had been filed and they were planning to confront me that evening. After leaving the law firm, she went home to pack and we met at the airport before flying to Cabo together. In another 2 days, we would head to Costa Rica, where there's a sizable expat community and one can live lavishly for less. Second story. Hi all. I need this off my chest, so I'll write about it here to also get some perspective. I recently started playing music again. And unfortunately, as it turns out, the music scene is full of predators. However, I met a guitarist who genuinely seemed like a really solid person. He even reached out to me to send a comfort text because he saw a ton of guys hoard on me after a performance and he just wanted me to know that he wasn't one of them. That he just wanted to get to know me because I seemed cool. That boundaries were important and that he knows navigating new social scenes is hard. He ended up coming by my place to hang out and talk about what goes into recording, though I don't have the time to indulge too much since I work 40 hours a week. That plus trying to keep everything else in my life together gives me very little time for my other hobbies. For reference, he's a musician full-time. He's a fairly talented man. I was never interested in him. He wasn't necessarily my physical type, so I felt safe just being friends. I always felt very comfortable with him and his personality was very in tune with mine. I learned that he was talented and intelligent as well as sensitive. He loves to cook and he loved fashion. We shared so many interests in common. It really felt like we were cut from the same cloth. We slowly discovered how similar we were, though now I'll never be sure if any of it was actually genuine or just part of his game. He didn't tell me he had a girlfriend until about the third time we hung out. Even then, he only did it because I told him that people were saying he had a crush on me. It ended up being he was in a 6-year-long relationship and they lived together, which was fine by me since I was involved with someone else at the time as well, casually. The man I was seeing ended up being a total psycho. He was living with a girlfriend and cheating on her. I ended up finding everything out and telling her what was going on. There was so much drama involved. During that tough period, my guitarist friend, whom we'll refer to as Jay, was my rock. He provided unwavering support and stability when I needed it most. Our friendship flourished as we shared our vulnerabilities, exchanged music, discussed kitchen gadgets and fashion trends, and delved into our perspectives on the world. Together, we vented about people we disliked and indulged in all the activities that deepen a bond between friends. We began spending more and more time together. Strangely, I never questioned the amount of time we spent together because Jay assured me that he and his girlfriend had a strong, secure relationship that didn't require constant togetherness. He often expressed his happiness about finding someone with whom he could make things work. Looking back, I realize he sometimes seemed condescending about my lack of relationship experience. I've always struggled in the dating department, as I tend to be trusting and optimistic, often attracting the wrong kind of people into my life. He started giving me gifts which I thought was just kindness, but then he started to call me cute, etc., which I told him made me feel uncomfortable. He didn't do it after. I'd be lying if I said I didn't start to notice how he would look at me. It was definitely lust and possession. I felt like his pet bear at some point. I started to develop feelings, of course. He was always so kind to me and just there. When I started feeling like I needed physical affection, I told him I couldn't talk to him anymore because it was inappropriate since I had developed feelings for him. I tried to cut everything off immediately. I had to return some equipment to him, so we ended up talking the day after my confession, and he said he felt the same way. This was so confusing to me. I told him he needed to tell his girlfriend. We ended up seeing each other for about 4 days straight, almost the whole of the days, and unfortunately it got a bit physical and we made out. It felt so wrong and so right at the same time. Unfortunately, the nature aspect of being a human was hard to control. He always seemed reluctant to get physical. I always thought that it was because he didn't want to cheat, but looking back, I think it was because he wanted me to be the one that started everything so he wouldn't have to take any blame for it. So he could always say that I came onto him physically. He said he would tell her, but he was taking too long. So I ended up blocking him everywhere on Valentine's Day because I knew I deserved more than that situation. I woke up to an email from him at 1 a.m. He had told her everything about his feelings for me, etc., and he was calling me because he was going to choose me. Blocking him led to a change of heart on his part. Eventually, he chose to remain with her. He penned a lengthy paragraph expressing the depth of our connection and offered an apology. However, his behavior during our last encounter was disrespectful. When I reached out to hold his hand, he rebuffed me, telling me not to push it. Deep down, I sensed it would be our final meeting. And all I wanted was to cherish that moment one last time. I now realize how foolish I was to believe that a man in a relationship merely sought friendship. It's clear to everyone, except me, how much he admired me. I feel incredibly foolish and naive. In the end, I was insignificant to him, a mere distraction from the monotony of his long-term relationship. I was nothing more than a tool to inject excitement back into his life. I can only imagine the manipulative stories he fed her to persuade her to stay. He isn't a liar per se, but he omits things, so he lies through omission. He's also insanely manipulative, probably one of the best manipulators I've met. The fact that he's intelligent explains why he's so good at it. Everything has a justification and an answer, and he's always just a tormented soul trying to be better and doing his best. I don't think that's true. I think he's probably done this kind of thing before, except no one has ever gotten as close as I did in his life. I realize now that I don't even know who he is. He only ever told me what he wanted me to know. None of it was genuine. He wanted to have sex with me, but he wanted it to be my idea. I'm just happy it never went that far. I refused to have sex with him because that was a strong line I just wouldn't cross. He kept asking me what I wanted while we were kissing. But he had left to the bathroom and used mouthwash and then kept asking me that. He just wanted me to initiate it so he could be a victim of my seduction. I will get over it. But he saw what that other man did to me and he betrayed me even more. I know I was still a participant in this and I take full responsibility for my actions. But I really thought I had met someone that I would never meet again. I can't even trust any of the parts of him that he showed me because now I feel like they were curated just to make me fall. He was romancing me the entire friendship and I fell for it because I was lonely and insecure. I'm in so much pain. And of course he gets to go home to someone to sleep with and console him, while I stay here traumatized. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon. Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. Oh man, let me tell you about my marriage. Me and my wife Hilly, we've been together for almost 20 years now. Can you believe it? Our anniversary is coming up real soon, on December 10th. And let me tell you, I wouldn't change a thing about our life together. Sure, we've had our share of fights, but the making up, oh, it was always so worth it. That's just how we rolled. Now there was this one rough patch early on, like in our second year together. Aside from that, everything was going smoothly. Hilly and I tied the knot at a young age. I was 20 and Hilly was just 18. We had grown up together, living in the same neighborhood. My older brother Bob had already married Pam, Hilly's sister, a year prior, so it felt like the next logical step for us. The only challenge was that Bob and Pam had a baby within the first year of their marriage, but we weren't as fortunate. Despite doctors advising us not to stress and let things happen naturally, we underwent tests. However, Hilly's mom was persistent about us starting a family. She had always been that way, especially since she only had daughters besides Pam. My mother-in-law, Jan, was eager for a grandson after having all girls herself. Unfortunately, the test results were inconclusive. Hilly was fine, but I had a slightly low sperm count or something like that. Honestly, I never fully grasped all the details. The doctors reassured us that the situation wasn't too serious and that everything was all right. They advised us to be patient and assured us that our first baby would come when the time was right. Although we tried to be patient, the pressure did put some strain on our marriage. Luckily, we didn't have to wait too long. In our 3rd year of marriage, Hilly gave birth just as the doctor had predicted. Linda arrived, a beautiful baby girl. It eased our worries about whether we could have children, and from then on, everything settled down and our marriage became even stronger. We were more relaxed about it all. Soon after, Hilly became pregnant again, and finally, Tom was born. A son. The whole family was ecstatic. This doesn't mean we loved our daughters any less, but having a son felt extra special for us. I was the first to have a son, and I proudly told my big brother about it. He just smiled and told me to give him time. Well, he got his chance, and sure enough, the following year, they had their first son too. 8 months later, we welcomed another son, Mike. It was like buses. You wait for ages, and then several come at once. With 2 brothers and 2 sisters, we lived like one big happy family. Even as Hilly's other sisters got married, they seamlessly became part of our tight-knit family circle. It brought immense joy to the children, providing a support network whenever needed. Observing the happiness of these couples, it seemed they were just as content as Hilly and me, relishing in the simple pleasures of married life surrounded by a loving family. There were hurdles, like when Bob had his work accident, and I felt a deep connection as my blood was transfused into him. Thankfully, he recovered, and I was fine too. We often shared brotherly banter about being true blood brothers after that incident. As our 20th anniversary approached, we pondered how to mark the occasion. Drawing inspiration from Bob and Pam's celebration the previous year, which was a blast, we decided to plan something similar. Booking a private room at the local hotel, we prepared for a grand gathering of family and friends to commemorate this milestone. But then, there was Linda, a beautiful 17-year-old girl, a younger and perhaps even prettier version of her mother. She had shiny dark brown hair and big green eyes that always caught your attention. She had a similar figure too, slim with nice legs and other features that maybe a father shouldn't think about too much. She naturally had a string of boyfriends, and the house always seemed to have one of them around. But she was level-headed, so we just rolled with it. Tom, I always thought, took after me a bit. Solidly built, and it suited him. He loved rugby, just like Bob and I did at his age. And at almost 16, he was already a regular player at fly half for his school's first team. And then there was young Mike, the youngest. Maybe he was going through a rough patch, not being as good at sports as Tom or as popular as Linda. Poor Mike wasn't having the best time. Nothing serious, you know. He was very smart, probably even smarter than the other 2, and did really well in school, just acting like a typical, totally incomprehensible teenager. That day, maybe I should have been more understanding. Maybe I should have overlooked the mess he'd left on the dining table. Maybe I should have just cleaned it up for him. But did I? No, you're not going out until you've cleaned up that mess, Mike. I told him firmly. I'll do it later. He replied, sulking. You'll do it now, Mike. I said firmly. Why are you always singling me out? He shouted back, losing his cool. I'm not, I replied sharply. You're part of this family and you'll follow our rules like everyone else. Who's gonna force me? Mike nearly cried, really losing his temper. I will, I retorted, starting to lose my patience. I'm your father and you'll do as I say. My father, huh? He yelled back. You sure about that? I froze in shock, my next word still stuck in my throat, stunned by what he said. Sorry, Dad. Mike quickly interjected, his face pained. Sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to say that. I'll clean it up right away. With that, he looked away from me and quickly tidied up the table, gathering the books and other items he had left there. Within minutes, everything was cleared and he hurried out of the room without saying another word, leaving me lost in my thoughts, wondering if my world was about to crumble. The problem, of course, was that Mike had always been so different from the other 2, more studious, more serious, but less outgoing than his older siblings. I often wondered why he was so different and had even discussed it with Hilly, but she just shrugged and told me I was imagining things. Was I? Had I been? What made Mike say that? If he had just yelled it in anger and walked away, I would have been upset. But that would have been it. But he was so quick to apologize and take back his words. Why? What did he know that I didn't? Oh, I didn't want to entertain the thoughts racing through my troubled mind at that moment. My initial impulse was to go find Hilly and demand answers. But what good would that do? What would I say? I couldn't just accuse her of cheating on me. If she had, she'd deny it. And if she hadn't, how would she ever forgive me for doubting her? Besides, it had been 16 years or more ago. But did that even matter? Was it still happening? My stomach churned and I felt nauseous, and I still didn't know if I had reason to worry. Oh God, what a terrible day it was. Blood types. That's it, I thought. Without hesitation, I went to our study and found the kids' medical records. Linda, Tom, and Mike all shared the O-positive blood type, which I recognized from donating blood to my brother. Initially, this brought a sense of relief until I realized that blood types alone didn't provide conclusive evidence. While it could have been a mere coincidence, it didn't assure me that Mike was indeed my son. The idea of resorting to DNA testing seemed drastic, spurred by one heated comment from Mike. I questioned whether I was overreacting, but Mike's avoidance and silence during dinner heightened my worries. Hilly noticed his unusual behavior too, prompting her to inquire about what was troubling Mike. No clue, I replied, shrugging. Do you guys know? They shook their heads, seemingly oblivious. Has he been upset about anything? I prodded, but they shook their heads again. Once the kids left the table, I mustered the courage to ask my wife. Mike seems so different from the other two. Hilly, I began. Any thoughts on why? Let's not dwell on that, Davy, she replied, getting up to clear the dishes. He's just a bit deeper than the others. End of story. Was she avoiding the topic deliberately, or was she genuinely unconcerned? I couldn't tell. Why not consider DNA testing? I was researching it online. An hour later, my head was swimming with information, but I wasn't much closer to an answer. It wasn't until Monday morning that I finally found a lab that could do the test. It took me nearly an hour, and my secretary could have probably done it much quicker. But how do you explain to your secretary why you need a lab test? Exactly. That's why I did it myself. The lab could do it, no problem. But it was expensive, especially if I wanted the results back quickly. But I had to know before I risked ruining my marriage. When I explained I needed to know before risking my marriage, they suggested I send samples from all 3 kids to cross-check, along with one of my own. Ever tried getting a hair from your grown-up kids? Not easy, I'll tell you. And with Mike avoiding me whenever possible, it was the hardest of all. But I managed it, sent them off, and waited. Now all I could do was wait to find out if Mike was really my son. Mike seemed to calm down, probably relieved I hadn't brought up his outburst. We were nearing a point where I felt ready to broach the topic with him delicately, but I decided it was prudent to wait for the results now that I had embarked on this path. Meanwhile, my wife remained her usual loving self, and our daily routine remained unchanged. Our intimate moments may not have been as passionate as before during those days, but I didn't reject her advances. However, doubts continued to eat away at me from within. I found it difficult to engage in intimacy with her without wondering if someone else had been involved during our 20 years of marriage. One evening, while having dinner with my brother and his wife, I almost confided in him about my concerns. We shared many similarities, so if someone else fathered Mike, logically, it couldn't have been him. Yet, I questioned why I was entertaining such thoughts. Was I already succumbing to paranoia? Nonetheless, something prevented me from sharing my worries with him. I didn't need to burden him with my uncertainties, and deep down I believed he would support me if the results turned out unfavorable. I remained composed. I stayed silent. I kept so quiet that Hilly asked me a couple of times if everything was all right. I reassured her, saying I had a few things on my mind. She looked concerned briefly but didn't push further. The results arrived. I had them sent to my office, just in case Hilly got there before me, and opened the letter. With trembling hands I read it, trying to grasp its meaning. Would this piece of paper mark the end of my marriage? After reading it, it seemed that Mike's results matched mine, and I felt a sense of relief, even though I didn't fully understand it. Medical terms are like gibberish to me. The report was filled with terms like good match and close match, so it appeared that my worries were unfounded. What a relief. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thanked my lucky stars that I hadn't shared my fears with Hilly. I decided to make it up to her that evening, perhaps by taking her out to dinner and afterward. Upon rereading the covering letter, which I hadn't paid much attention to before, I noticed that the lab wanted me to call them to discuss the results. I figured they just wanted to squeeze some extra cash out of me, and I wasn't sure if it was worth the hassle. When the phone was answered, I introduced myself as Davy Jones and mentioned that Dr. Hoskins had asked me to call. After providing some references, I finally got through to the doctor. He greeted me. "Have you had a chance to review the results we sent you?" "Yes," I replied confidently. "It seems that my worries about my son Mike were unfounded." "Yes, indeed," he responded. "But it's not quite that simple, I'm afraid," he added, and my heart sank as I waited for him to deliver the bad news. "You mean he's not my son?" I stammered. "It's not that, Mr. Jones," he clarified. "There's less than a 1 in a million chance that he's not your biological child. I am certain that he is your natural-born son. So, Mike is my real son." I sighed in relief. "Yes, he is, Mr. Jones." "Then what's the problem?" I asked, feeling uncertain. What else could be wrong? I was starting to worry because I had heard that DNA testing could also reveal genetic diseases. "It's the other 2 samples you sent in," the doctor said heavily. "What about the samples from your son's brother and sister?" I asked, feeling a surge of panic. "Is there something wrong with one of them?" "Well, it seems that they are only half-siblings to your youngest son, Mr. Jones," the doctor explained. Half-siblings, I stuttered in shock. What does that mean, doctor? What's a half-sibling? I inquired anxiously, my voice trembling with uncertainty. It means, Mr. Jones, he explained calmly, that it's highly unlikely that you are their biological father. The phone slipped from my grasp, and the world around me blurred as I struggled to maintain consciousness. My concerned co-workers gathered around me, urging me to breathe and offering support as I fought to regain my composure. Slowly, I began to come to, gasping for air as reality crashed back in. Are you okay, Davy? Someone asked, their voice cutting through the haze of my thoughts. I nodded weakly, attempting to rise from my chair with their help, as they guided me back to my seat. Their chatter about work and office temperatures seemed distant and insignificant compared to the bombshell I had just been hit with. Grateful for the suggestion to go home and rest, I stumbled out of the office, my mind racing with confusion and disbelief. Arriving home to an empty house, I sank into a chair, my thoughts swirling with dread. With trembling hands, I reached for the phone, knowing what I had to do next. Dialing the laboratory's number once more, I braced myself for the conversation ahead. No worries, Mr. Jones, the doctor's voice reassured me on the other end. Our postal service can be tricky to navigate at times. Taking a deep breath, I apologized for the earlier interruption and listened as he patiently reviewed the test results with me once more. Mike is definitely your son, he confirmed, his words offering a glimmer of relief amidst the turmoil. But Linda and Tom are unlikely to be your biological children. But the results showed good or close matches, I pleaded. Could there be a mistake? If we had only one sample, we might request another for verification, he explained. But with 2 samples, the likelihood is nearly certain. While Linda and Tom are full siblings, it's improbable that you're their father. But you said the matches were close, I insisted, clinging to a glimmer of hope. What does that mean? Do you have a twin or a brother, Mr. Jones? The doctor cautiously inquired. Or perhaps another relative. My brother, I exclaimed, a surge of excitement coursing through me. What does my brother have to do with this situation? You'll have to come to your own conclusions, Mr. Jones. The doctor's voice droned on, but I wasn't really listening anymore. My world had suddenly shattered into pieces. What should I do now? End my marriage. You can't choose your family after all. Should I just pretend I didn't know anything? Keep living a lie? I couldn't bear it. And what about Mike? He knew something was wrong, but he had the wrong idea. From now on, I'd see my son in a different way, but I couldn't love Linda and Tom any less. They were my kids, no matter whose genes they carried. And no piece of paper could change that. But what about Hilly? That was the real question. What about that witch? And my jerk of a brother too? And Pam, my sister-in-law? How would they react to the news? How would the rest of the family handle it? So many questions were swirling in my head. Oh God, this was all so complicated and I didn't feel ready to deal with it. I vaguely remember stepping out of the front door and starting to walk down the street, but the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital with bandages all over my arms. I had stumbled in front of a car while completely wasted. But I didn't remember any of that at the time. Davy, are you all right? I turned to see who had asked, but it hurt. It hurt like crazy. Then I recognized the voice and realized it was my ex-wife speaking to me. Not really. Not yet, anyway, I replied. She was still my wife. I didn't say much, couldn't find the right words. What was I supposed to say? Hey, honey, just found out 2 of our kids aren't mine. And you've been messing around with my brother. How was your day? What's for dinner? Yeah, that didn't sound quite right, did it? Anyway, it turned out my injuries weren't too serious, and they sent me home the next day. I couldn't do much for myself, so I relied on Hilly to take care of me. It gave me time to think, time to plan. But honestly, it felt like a waste of time because I still didn't know what to do. The main concern now was Mike and the other 2 kids. Whatever decision I made had to be in their best interest, even if it meant sacrificing my own. Hilly's needs came last from then on. All I knew was our 20th anniversary was coming up and the room was booked for our big dinner. I had to figure things out by then. Within about a week, I was more or less back to normal, at least physically. Everything seemed to fall back into place while I contemplated my next move. But Mike was different. He seemed like he was on the edge, just the right age to act out. You should talk to him, Davy, Hilly said one evening. I don't know what's bothering him. He doesn't seem to want to talk to me anymore. I'll have a chat with him, I promised. Any idea what's going on with him? She asked me. I've got a few ideas, I said shortly. Want to talk about them, Davy? She asked. Not really, I replied, catching her off guard. The chance came the next day when I found him alone in his room and he couldn't avoid me. Want to talk about what's bothering you, son? I began gently. He simply shook his head, his reluctance to speak evident. Is it about the other day, Mike? About our relationship? I probed gently, sensing a maturity in him that caught me off guard. You don't understand, Dad, he challenged, his tone edged with frustration. I might know more than you think, son, I countered, mustering a reassuring smile. Then why don't you do something about it, Dad? He pushed back, his words carrying a weight I hadn't anticipated. This conversation was taking an unexpected turn. What do you mean, son? What are you talking about? I inquired, my confusion mounting. You really don't know, Dad? He repeated, his voice tinged with disappointment. Apparently not, son, I admitted, my heart sinking with each passing moment. It's Mom and Uncle Tim, Dad, he whispered, his words hanging heavy in the air. When you're at work, once a month or so, it's so embarrassing. The mention of Uncle Tim stirred a mix of emotions within me. Tim wasn't Hilly's husband. He was married to another one of Hilly's sisters. Oh, that, I muttered under my breath, feeling utterly helpless. They've been doing it for years, Dad, my son continued, his voice filled with sorrow. Linda thinks I'm Tim's son, not yours. With that revelation, he broke down in tears, and I instinctively pulled him into a comforting embrace. It had been too long since I'd held him like this, and I was taken aback by the strength in his frame. I can assure you, Mike, I whispered softly, holding him close, that you are my son, and nothing will ever change that. You are my son in every way, not Tim's. How do you know, Dad? He sobbed. How can you be sure? I'm sure, son, I told him confidently. Believe me, I'm sure. We talked for a while longer, and without revealing too much, I managed to convince him of his true parentage. It was like a weight being lifted off his shoulders. However, my brother's involvement as the father of Linda and Tom was not mentioned, revealing that my supposedly perfect family was not as content as I had thought. Both Linda and Tom were aware of their mother's affair with their uncle, but opted to ignore it, unsure of how to address the situation. It was a terrible position to put them in. As for Tim, he was the youngest of the 4 sisters, and undoubtedly the most attractive. While Hilly had her charms, Tim's wife added another layer of complexity to my already strained marriage. A few days later, I took all 3 kids out for lunch and did the most challenging thing I've ever had to do. I disclosed everything I had discovered. Throughout the day, I anxiously awaited their reactions, fearing the worst. Surprisingly, they handled the news relatively well. Linda shed a few tears and Tom sat with his head in his hands, clearly distraught. All 3 expressed a desire to confront their mother immediately. However, I convinced them to hold off, as I needed to sort out a few things first. All 3 of them pledged their love and loyalty to me, and were close to cutting ties with Hilly for good. I managed to dissuade them from that, reminding them that despite her mistakes, she had always been a caring mother to them. I spoke about her in a way that didn't quite match my true feelings, especially after hearing the kids' revelations. According to them, Hilly, my supposedly loving wife, had been involved in some kind of relationship with her brother-in-law Tim for a while. However, it probably wasn't long enough for him to be Mike's father. The once-a-month claim might have been an exaggeration too, but none of us were certain. One thing was clear though. The kids felt relieved to finally share their burden, and all 3 of them shed tears. Yes, even Tom joined in as we gathered together that evening. Let me correct that last statement. All 4 of us shed tears. I crave revenge, but I had to find a way to seek it without causing pain to my children. And yes, I chose my words carefully. I meant it when I said I needed revenge. I meant it for him. And yes, I meant it for my children. I pondered for a while but couldn't come up with a grand scheme for revenge. It seemed like a direct confrontation was my only option. Luckily, I had the upcoming event to do just that. The 10th of December, our family had gathered, as families do. With my parents no longer with us, Bob and I found ourselves among the elder members of the gathering. That evening, a group of 39 of us convened for the celebratory dinner, predominantly comprised of Hilly's relatives, along with a few of our mutual friends. While they praised the meal, to me, it might as well have been tasteless and uninspiring. Then came the speeches, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of anxiety. Was this the end, or perhaps just the beginning? As I struggled to calm my nerves with deep breaths, I knew that what I had to say wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. Welcome, everyone, I began, attempting to ease into the conversation with some light banter. Then, I steered the conversation towards celebrating 20 years of marriage with my wife, Hilly. But there were some very interesting and personal things about our marriage that I needed to share with everyone. And that's where things were about to get interesting. Laughter filled the room, and there were a few jokes about our bed life. Hilly blushed, thinking it was all in good fun. But little did they know how mistaken they were. As the laughter settled, Linda stood up abruptly, followed by Tom and then Mike, without a word to anyone. The whole table watched, bewildered and curious about what was going on. Come back here, all 3 of you, Hilly exclaimed, jumping up. Don't be disrespectful to your father." Only Tom glanced back at his mother with a sad shake of his head before joining his siblings outside. "David," Hilly called to me, desperate for me to intervene. "Tell them to come back right now." "It's all right, dear," I responded firmly. "They already know what I'm going to say. And since it concerns them, maybe it's best they're not here." Hilly looked shocked at my response, first surprised by my defiance, then worried as she tried to understand my motive. "Sit down, Hilly," I commanded firmly, my tone leaving no room for argument. As I was saying, I continued, scanning the faces around me. "I've had 20 years of what I thought was a perfect marriage, until a few weeks ago." I paused for effect, feeling the tension in the air. Some looked puzzled, others still wore smiles, expecting a joke, but many seemed concerned, surprising me. Imagine my shock. I went on when no one spoke up, to discover that Linda, my beloved daughter, is not biologically mine. Hilly couldn't hold back her sobs, her hands covering her face, breaking the silence. But she remained silent, only her crying disrupting the quiet. "Fine then," I pressed on. "Does anyone else want to confess who's been with my wife behind my back?" No one dared to speak, and I stood there, my gaze sharp and accusing, surveying the stunned faces of my family and friends. As terrible as it sounds, there was a strange satisfaction in exposing those who had deceived me. They had no idea how much I had uncovered. I couldn't resist giving my brother Bob a stern look, and he visibly squirmed under my gaze, knowing he had been caught. "No one's going to confess," I challenged them. "Do I have to reveal the truth?" Then, to my surprise, Bob's wife Pam stood up abruptly. "It's not what you think, Davy," she exclaimed, distressed. "It wasn't an affair. We just had love a few times to help Hilly get pregnant." The anticipation for a boy within the family had been palpable, particularly from my mother's perspective, given the doubts surrounding my ability to father a child. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. It was as if the room held its breath, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Pam's knowing glance confirmed my worst fears. She was aware of the truth about her husband and my daughter. Glancing around the table, I noticed a clear divide among those present. Some appeared shocked by the revelation, while others seemed entirely unsurprised. It was evident that some friends were caught off guard, while certain family members appeared to have been privy to the information all along. As I struggled to compose myself amidst the tension, guests began to excuse themselves one by one, until only around 17 or 18 relatives remained. "Why don't you kids go play over there?" suggested Julie, another of Hilly's sisters, as she gently directed the younger children away from the gathering. The teenagers were encouraged to leave too, but it seemed like they were glued to the scene, not willing to miss the drama. "Well, you all seem to know what's going on, don't you?" I exclaimed, looking around. "You're all aware of this mess, except maybe the kids here." A couple of husbands appeared confused, but nobody denied it. "Look, Davy," my brother attempted to explain. "It's not what you think, I swear." He seemed poised to say more, but my expression of pure anger silenced him instantly. "So you all knew that Bob slept with my wife and fathered Linda? Huh?" I demanded of the table. Nobody admitted it outright, but again, nobody denied it. "I swear it was just 3 times, Davy," Pam defended herself, her voice rising. Whose ridiculous idea was this anyway? I shouted angrily, my frustration growing. Once again, nobody dared to speak, but too many eyes shifted towards Jan, my mother-in-law. "I should have known," I muttered, acknowledging her role. "Thanks a lot, Mom," I said to her with a heavy heart. "Your desperation for a son has shattered my marriage." "No," Hilly finally intervened, her voice trembling. "Please, Davy, don't say that. I can't imagine life without you. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive one mistake?" "One mistake?" I echoed incredulously. "Just one mistake." "Yes, honey," Hilly pleaded tearfully. "It was only that one time. It seems so foolish now, but back then, Mom's plan made sense." "And what about Tom?" I pressed her, my tone firm. "Well, he's yours, of course, Davy," she assured me. "Wrong," I corrected her sternly. "I've had a DNA test done. And his father is the same man as Linda's." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. "What are you saying, David?" Pam exclaimed in shock. "You heard me, Pam," I confirmed, not backing down. "If my dear brother there is Linda's father, then he's also Tom's father." Silence hung heavily in the air as this revelation sunk in. "You scoundrel, Bob," Pam snapped at her husband, her voice trembling with anger. "You promised me this wouldn't happen. And then you went off and slept with that woman again," Bob muttered, avoiding eye contact, clearly regretting his actions. "And you traitor," Pam yelled at Hilly, her voice seething with anger. "I agreed to let you have my husband just that one time. And then you continue sleeping with him." With that, she marched 3 steps towards her sister and slapped Hilly hard across the face. "You deceitful cow," she spat, striking Hilly repeatedly until someone intervened and pulled her away. Tears streamed down Pam's face as she was restrained. "Are you satisfied, Mom?" I demanded, glaring at Jan, but she remained expressionless. "So who else has been betraying me?" I challenged the room, locking eyes with Tim, who sat across from me. "You scoundrel!" Julie screamed beside me, shocking me with her outburst. "It's true what they said. You did sleep with her that night at the party." Confusion filled the air as Julie turned to her husband Ted, who sheepishly admitted to the accusation. "And you, my dear sister," Julie turned her fury towards Hilly. "Have you slept with all your brother-in-laws, you shameless woman?" "Well, she certainly had her way with Tim over there," I interjected, a sense of satisfaction creeping in. Tim's feeble attempts to deny the accusations only fueled the chaos, leading to Julie delivering a swift blow to his nose. "Don't bother coming home tonight," she yelled at him. "In fact, don't ever come back." Pam unleashed her fury on Bob. "I'm divorcing you, and I never want to lay eyes on you again." The three upset sisters linked arms and headed for the door. "You're no sister of ours," they yelled at Hilly as they stormed out. "Feeling pleased now, Jan?" I confronted my mother-in-law, but she remained stoic, staring straight ahead as Hilly continued to cry into her arms. Finally, my father-in-law Alf spoke up. "I'm sorry, Davy," Alf began, his voice heavy with regret. "If only I had known." He trailed off, unable to find the right words, but he was the only one who made any attempt at an apology. Then Brother Bob approached me, his hands outstretched, a look of profound shame on his face. "David," he stammered. "David, what can I say?" "Nothing, you scoundrel," I retorted, my words lacking real force. I swung at him, catching him on the chin with little strength behind it. Yet the timing was perfect, and he stumbled backward, tripping over a chair and landing sprawled on the floor, making no effort to rise. That seemed to mark the end of the festivities as the atmosphere soured, draining the fun out of the evening. Hilly didn't return home that night, and after grabbing a few things, she never returned. The kids were adamant about not speaking to her for a while, despite my own feelings of hatred towards her. However, I had to prioritize the well-being of the kids. Eventually, they softened and allowed her back into their lives, but things were never the same. I remained dad, while she became more like a distant figure. The family was torn apart. Two of the sisters who left that night filed for divorces, leaving only Pam to stick with Bob. However, she gave him a rough time, believing in giving him a taste of his own medicine. Pam showed up a couple of nights later when the kids were out, and her intentions quickly became clear. Whether it was revenge or a way to get back at me, I never found out, but I certainly got my payback. There was no love or tenderness, we just engaged in a physical frenzy for hours. It felt strange, like being intimate with my wife but different. Afterward, she thanked me and left. It was only months later that I discovered she had been doing the same with Bob's friends one by one. Would their marriage survive this? I didn't have a clue. And honestly, it wasn't my concern, but I could imagine it being pretty rough for my brother. About 3 weeks later, one of my other sisters, the attractive one, gave me a call and asked me out for dinner. I agreed, and we went out, had a meal, chatted, flirted, kissed, and ended up in bed. However, this time it felt different. After the initial excitement, we shared a deeper connection, making love reminiscent of the early days with Hilly. I couldn't fathom why Tim had strayed from his marriage, but it definitely wasn't due to any lack of desire for intimacy. Perhaps the sweetest twist was when Jan's long-suffering husband Alf had enough of her. He bought a 40-foot yacht and spent the rest of his days sailing around Europe. It was quite convenient for me and the kids. We often joined him for sailing trips, exploring places like the south of France, Mallorca, and the Canary Islands, creating cherished, Linda-crossed paths with a young Spaniard while sailing, and eventually tied the knot with him. He hailed from a family that owned one of Europe's largest boat marinas, which turned out to be quite advantageous. As for the boys, they're taking their time and not rushing into marriage too soon, perhaps learning from their father's experience. They've got plenty of time ahead of them. As for me, I don't have much contact with Hilly, but the kids keep me updated. Apparently, she's taking life one day at a time and often inquires about me. I just nod in response. Oh, and as for my own love life, I'm considering giving marriage another shot, but this time, I'm looking inward. There's a mutual affection between us, but we're both a bit cautious. Time will tell. I want to be certain that I'm not getting married partly out of spite toward Hilly, although I must admit, the thought of her reaction if I did tie the knot again brings a smile to my face. Second story, 4 years gone just like that. Me 28 divided by she 24 Fahrenheit. So about 4 hours ago I was sent a few snaps and a video by one of her friends from a club. That's no big deal because she used to be a bartender herself and is largely a party girl and loves going to her events and clubbing with her friends to unload stress. Except they sent pictures of her being with another guy getting drinks. I watched her snap score real quick and sent a snap, which I have never done before until they asked me to. It went up by 38 before she decided to respond to me asking her how work was slogging along and got pretty bored tbh text working on machine wit. 4 years gone just like that. Pretext. Had 2 other relationships. My first one she odded on fentanyl during high school, and the second one I guess I still really wasn't ready at all after the first and it just never worked out. I still remember the day we met as it was my first time at a music festival and I gave no fucks about my health or safety and basically ended up being sent straight to the M's tent at day 2. She came in after me by a few hours, which I was sober enough to be reading a book and alone in a corner. She got brought in and just said to the M's guy that I looked like a lonely stray dog and just sat right beside me and told me we'd take turns reading it out loud with character voices without a hint of hesitation at all while being baked to oblivion, and that's how it all started. I knew we were almost complete opposites and that's how we met. I'm a pretty big introvert and she was probably the most extroverted person I'd met at this point. I thought we were perfect together as she enjoyed getting me into festivals and events. I enjoyed the fact I could blend into the background with her and she was always so hyped about my hobbies and really did enjoy going on multi-day hikes for the views, teaching her how to fish, bike, snowboard for the first times. I just came back from her place with 2 buddies after getting all my stuff I'd leave over and packing up all my tools into the workbench and loading it up. Explained to her mom what I was doing and why. I've never seen her more angry in my life. She was screaming into the phone when I was leaving, telling her husband to get home and asking if I would wait until he'd show up. I just had to leave. I couldn't deal with it. Friends helped me unpack my stuff and I asked to leave me alone for a bit. Just canceled the tickets for a dozen concerts. Festivals we planned on going together and realizing that I was the one paying for most of our stuff to begin with. Spiteful for me to notice now, I guess though. Been a long time since I've done atom bombs, so not feeling bad at all right now and went ahead and removed and blocked her on everything I could think of, but fuck me does it hurt and make me fellow hollow. It's hard to describe right now how I feel besides being angry, jealousy, revenge, shame, wanting to just odd and end everything all rolled up into one. Don't think I've ever been this low before, so I'll see what happens. I'm off to shower, try to sleep. We'll edit this whenever I wake up tomorrow and see. Update for everyone. Slept a few hours and was at the gym for a few hours to help clear my head. Best friend came over and basically grabbed all of her shit when I was gone and dumped it at her parents' house and spoke to them. Parents passed a message on to me saying that I'm allowed to come over whenever I want and not to be a stranger and hopefully still play with their Dobermans from time to time. They also specifically said that I wouldn't be seeing her very often if I did come over, as she's been it's time to grow up, so they're kicking her out at the end of March. Also sent me a gift of a few bottles of vintage bourbons and scotches for all the help I've done, with a note telling me to get a drink with him and the tab should be considered paid for in advance. She attempted to deceive multiple times, each time being caught red-handed. Initially, she claimed she went to the bar with her friends, insisting she wasn't with any guys. Later, she asserted it was just a gay friend, implying it didn't count. Then she added she went to work afterward, despite being 4 hours late. Despite all this, she adamantly denies anything untoward happened. If it did, she attributes it to both being intoxicated and not intending any wrongdoing, insisting she doesn't recall much of the night and may have been spiked. Moreover, she's been sharing stories on social media, portraying herself crying and denying any wrongdoing, framing it as a huge misunderstanding and accusing me of heartlessly ruining her life. She's now seeking alternative accommodation. Hearing her explanations has led me to overthink everything we've shared in the past, questioning whether I can trust any of our history together. I'm left wondering how many other opportunities she might have had to cheat without being caught. Went ahead and booked a few therapist appointments on my company's dime to see if we'll help, and got my first one booked for this Wednesday coming up. My own parents drove all the way down and dropped off my dog so I wouldn't do anything stupid with her around. She called and admitted to have been seeing the guy on and off for the last 5 months. Claimed it was only a few times and he was forcing her to do it after the first time. That she only did it because I wasn't giving her enough attention. Hung up immediately after she started asking for another chance, and that she'll change and do whatever I'd ask. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon. Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. I couldn't believe my eyes. Simone, my spouse for 5 years, was shirtless on the lap of a guy in the hot tub below. Their expressions made it evident they were engaging in lovemaking activities. Fuming, I angrily filmed a brief video with my phone. Although I contemplated changing into swim trunks, I decided against it, opting to sit in the room, pondering why she didn't want me at the party. She seemed genuinely happy. Now the reason behind her contentment became clear. Earlier that week, I came across a text on her phone regarding a company Christmas party with a +1 invitation. When I broached the topic, she tried to dissuade me, voicing concerns about potential boredom amidst discussions about finances with financial experts. Perplexed, I asked if she felt embarrassed to be seen with me. She reassured me, clarifying that it wasn't about embarrassment but rather the expected tedious conversations about money at the event. Usually, her company's monthly parties were for staff only, resulting in Simone staying out late into the night or even the next day. While I hadn't previously made a fuss about it, now I gained insight into what transpired at these gatherings. I responded with understanding, acknowledging her explanation. She then suggested that if I decided to attend, I should ensure my tuxedo was cleaned. However, she cautioned me, expressing skepticism about whether I would find the event enjoyable. On the day of the party, she recommended I bring swim trunks, prompting me to question the appropriateness of swimwear for a December Christmas party. She explained that they usually end up in her boss's penthouse after the main party, which has a nice hot tub. I acknowledged this information, and she admitted that they do this pretty much every time. She then requested that I promise to be on my best behavior that night, to which I assured her that I always am, though it didn't sound promising. Curious, I asked why she was sharing this information with me. She explained that these parties could get quite wild sometimes, and she didn't want me to get upset, mentioning that the guys there are quite friendly and can get pretty handsy. I inquired about potential issues, stating that as long as everything passes the husband test, there shouldn't be any problem. In response, she smiled and kissed me on the cheek without verbalizing anything. At the main party, Simone introduced me to her friend Linda, stating that I was her husband. Linda smiled at me and questioned the term husband, suggesting that it was going to be fun and referring to Simone as a wild and crazy girl. Wondering about the meaning behind Linda's comment, Simone smiled and giggled. She informed me that she needed to go mingle and instructed Linda to accompany her to get something to drink, specifically asking for wine. They left. I went to the bar, ordered her wine, and got a beer for myself. Despite scanning the area, Simone was nowhere to be found. I searched for her but found no trace. After half an hour, I settled at an empty table, hoping she'd come looking for me. Meanwhile, I observed the lively dance floor, feeling ignored as people walked around me as if I were invisible. It seemed she was right. I wasn't having any fun, and I grew increasingly frustrated that my wife had abandoned me. After nursing my beer for a couple of hours, I decided to call it quits. If Simone wasn't going to spend time with me, I'd head home and leave her with her friends. As I walked to the entrance, Simone and Linda approached with 3 other guys, one with his arm around Simone's waist. Simone skipped introductions, expressing a slightly intoxicated greeting of, "Oh, there you are." When she kissed me, I detected the taste of tequila and something I mentioned that I was about to go home since she had abandoned me 2 hours ago, asking where she had been. Simone blushed, avoiding eye contact as the guys smirked, and I chose not to confront them. Linda explained that they had been having a few shots. Simone looked puzzled at Linda's explanation, leaving me curious about the situation. I asked Simone about the shots, mentioning the taste of tequila and something else. She dismissed it, saying they were heading to Ben's place where the hot tub was warming up, and she asked if I was ready. I replied affirmatively and inquired if I would get to spend some time with her or if she planned to abandon me again that night. She assured me not to be silly and mentioned that I would see her later. She decided to ride with Linda and the guys, suggesting it was okay if I followed. I suggested she ride with me, but one of the guys grabbed Simone's hand and pulled her away, irritating me even more. They left, with Simone and Linda following the guys, and laughter echoed as they departed. I got my car and followed them. Upon arrival, I saw Simone in a bikini, leaving me puzzled. When we got there, Simone was already in the hot tub with the 2 guys, later revealed as Ben and Dale, the senior partners in the firm. They appeared to be nothing more than affluent frat boys. After they left, Linda approached me and inquired if I thought we could meet up later that evening. I replied by questioning what made her believe I would be inclined to do so, emphasizing that I'm married. She seemed surprised, mentioning that she had assumed we had an open marriage based on Simone's interactions with other men, particularly the way Simone had kissed me earlier. Perplexed, I asked her to clarify what she meant by Simone's earlier kiss. Linda disclosed that Simone had already been involved with Ben and Dale. Disgusted, I felt a wave of nausea, and Linda's expression changed as she realized my shock. She exclaimed, I acknowledged that I didn't and asked how long this had been happening. Linda revealed that it had been going on ever since Simone joined the company over a year ago. Shocked, I processed the information, realizing that Simone had been involved with them the entire time, and I had been completely unaware. I questioned if that was what she was doing at the party. Linda disclosed that Simone had been involved with 2 guys and a few others, expressing apologies and assuming I knew about it, to which I replied sarcastically, expressing skepticism about feeling the love. Linda suggested I go upstairs and change, hoping Simone would keep herself under control with my presence. I scoffed at the suggestion but headed upstairs. That's when I saw her with those 2 guys. Despite my love for her, I found it intolerable and decided to confront her. Going downstairs, Simone greeted me as I reached the bottom of the stairs, questioning why I wasn't in my bathing suit and if I was joining them in the hot tub. I grabbed her arm, pulled her into a nearby room and closed the door, demanding to know if she would ever tell me about having an open marriage. I mentioned what Linda had told me and played a video on my phone showing her with the 2 guys in the hot tub. I questioned the situation, wondering if she aimed to humiliate me further after abandoning me at the party. Simone downplayed it, claiming they were just having fun, admitting to lovemaking acts with them, and asserting it didn't mean anything. Shocked, I disagreed, emphasizing that it meant everything. I took off my wedding ring and placed it in her hand, then removed her rings from her left hand. She asked what I was doing, and I told her I found her actions disgusting, expressing my current hatred towards her. I wished her a Merry Christmas, mentioned I would be seeing a lawyer about a divorce on Monday, and instructed her not to bother coming home. Despite her pleas and declarations of love, I remained indifferent, stating that I no longer cared about her desires. Asserting that I knew the truth and understanding why she didn't want me to come with her, I bid farewell to Simone and left. One of the guys, uncertain which one, called after me, questioning why I was leaving so soon and complimenting Simone. I replied casually, saying she was now theirs. Leaving the penthouse, I went downstairs to my car and drove home. Simone began calling and texting me, but I ignored her attempts to reach me. Upon arriving home, I deleted her messages and blocked her number. I changed out of my tux, grabbed some trash bags, and started tossing her clothes and things into them. I put them into her car and pulled it out of the garage. I removed the garage door opener and changed the code so she couldn't get back inside. By then it was about 2:30 a.m., and I was dead tired. I fell on the bed and instantly went to sleep. I woke up the next morning to the sound of our house phone ringing. I picked it up without thinking. "Yeah," I said when I answered. Simone called, requesting me to come and get her. I responded that she was no longer my concern. She pleaded for a conversation, but I insisted that any communication could go through my lawyer. I informed her about her car being in my parking space with all her belongings packed, and then I hung up. Despite her immediate callback, I disconnected the house phone, having no intention of encountering her face or hearing her voice again. I fell back on the bed and went to sleep, plugging the phone back in. When I got up that afternoon, after I finally woke up enough to be coherent, I looked and saw that her car was gone. Good, maybe she finally got the message. I started looking online for a divorce lawyer and read all I could find about the divorce laws in our state. This was a community property state, but we didn't own any real estate, so that wouldn't be an issue. We had no children, so there would be no child support. She made as much, if not a little more than me, so I didn't think there would be any alimony. I also found that while most divorces in this state were no fault, there was a provision to file on the basis of infidelity, cruelty, or misuse that would make the divorce more costly and take more time to resolve, but I didn't care about that. After looking, I noted the number for one Jenny Hawkins, attorney at law, and decided to give her a call on Monday. While making notes, my cell phone rang, and I noticed an unfamiliar number. Considering it could be Simone or anyone else, I chose to answer. A female voice identified herself as Linda and informed me that Simone was staying with her for a few days. I confirmed my intention to proceed with the divorce. Linda expressed concern for Simone, describing her as a wreck, crying in her room and fearing a nervous breakdown. I remained indifferent, stating that Simone brought it upon herself. Linda inquired about any lingering feelings I might have for Simone, to which I responded with current sentiments of hatred and disgust. I stressed that Simone's infidelity had persisted for over a year and that she had the nerve to publicly disgrace me, leading me to conclude that our relationship was over. Linda suggested that Simone still loved me, to which I responded skeptically, questioning Simone's behavior after my departure and the duration of their stay at the penthouse. I inquired if Simone had slept with Ben and Dale again, seeking clear answers. Linda admitted that they all gathered after my departure to console Simone, insinuating that I could have enjoyed the evening had I stayed. I expressed disbelief, wondering where people like her came from, and then ended the call, bidding farewell. After hanging up, I noticed 2 text messages from unfamiliar numbers that arrived early in the morning after I had gone to bed. Upon checking, I discovered videos attached to them. One message read, "Missed one hell of a party, bro." I played the video and witnessed Simone engaging in intimate activities with 3 men at the penthouse. While Ben and Dale were recognizable, the third person was unfamiliar. The man I didn't recognize looked into the camera and spoke. "That's quite a wife you have there, brah," he said with a grin. "Too bad you weren't here. The second video was more of the same, except it ended with Ben having my wedding ring. As Simone held it in her open hand, she looked at the camera with a smirk. My hatred for her only grew exponentially. I transferred the videos to my PC and made a copy of them for the lawyer. I thought about sending the videos to all of her friends and her family, but decided against it, at least for now. The info I got from Jenny's website indicated that I needed to be very careful about how I reacted to her actions. Any negative reaction on my part could easily undo my case. Her site warned okay, so I decided to hold off for the time being. I didn't hear anything from Simone or Linda the rest of that day or the next, which was a good thing as far as I was concerned. I spent the remainder of the weekend eradicating Simone's presence from the apartment. On Monday, I reached out to my boss, detailing the situation, and took a brief vacation. Recognizing my diminished worth during this time, my boss, having experienced a divorce from an unfaithful spouse, empathized with my emotions. I contacted Jenny's office, scheduling an appointment for that afternoon. En route to the appointment, I visited the bank, implementing measures to disentangle her from our joint account. I settled her joint credit card and subsequently canceled it, withdrawing half of our assets to establish a new account in my name. Jenny elucidated the divorce laws in our state and proposed pursuing an alienation of affection lawsuit against her employers. Given the evidence I possessed, I entrusted her with the decision. Concerning the delivery of legal papers, I opted for their office, intending for them to experience a degree of the public humiliation they subjected me to over the past year. After our meeting, I paid a retainer and returned home. On the way, I received a call from Linda. "Hello," I answered. She proposed a meeting with Simone that afternoon, to which I declined, following my attorney's advice to maintain distance. She offered Simone's contact information after consulting with someone. After I provided Jenny's contact details, Linda attempted one last time to advocate for Simone. I firmly rejected any possibility of forgiveness, asserting that Simone could anticipate divorce papers soon. I concluded the call and proceeded home, stopping only to purchase a 12-pack of beer and a couple of packs of cigarettes. Having quit smoking when we first got married, I felt the need to engage in something to prevent destructive behavior after arriving home. The house phone rang, and when I answered with a greeting, Ben Carlson, my wife's employer, identified himself. Recognizing his voice from the party, and noting a more professional tone, I acknowledged knowing who he was and asked about his intentions. Ben expressed awareness of my upset feelings about the events on Friday, and claimed that they thought I was okay with my wife's activities at company gatherings. I questioned if he knew she was married during all this, and he admitted yes, but explained that Simone had told them we had an open marriage, and he assumed I was okay with it. I pointed out that he never bothered to ask me about it and inquired about the videos they sent me on Friday night. Ben stated that the videos were Simone's idea and apologized, expressing regret for the situation. He asked if there was anything he could do to make it up to me, to which I responded by outlining my terms. I mentioned my intention to kick his balls into the middle of next week after he testifies against her in court, and the plan to sue him for alienation of affection. I made it clear that if he wanted to make amends, he should accept my terms without any argument, and asked if he had anything else to add. He inquired if I was truly suing them, and I affirmed, emphasizing their violation of their own morals clauses over the past year while destroying my marriage. He dismissed it, claiming it was all in fun, and they never intended to ruin my marriage. I questioned his expectations, expressing disbelief that I would applaud them for their actions. I suggested he might have been influenced by internet stories. He pleaded, proposing that we could work through the situation, and he worried that a lawsuit could ruin them. I dismissed it as not my problem, and ended the call. Grabbing a beer, I went to the balcony for a smoke. I didn't hear from them until Wednesday when they were served at Simone's office. Linda expressed disbelief at my actions, stating that I didn't give Simone a chance to explain and highlighting her current humiliation. I remained indifferent, stating that I didn't care about Simone's feelings after what she did and instructed Linda not to call again, slamming the phone down. A few moments later, I received another call from a number I recognized as coming from Ben's office. I answered, yelling, and he insulted me, threatening to kick my rear. He accused me of ruining his life and vowed to ruin mine in return. I slammed the phone down and called Jenny to tell her about Ben's threat. "Good," she said. "I'll file for a temporary restraining order against Simone as well as her cohorts today. I'll make sure you get a copy of the order. Remember what I said. Don't do anything reckless. What if he comes after me?" I voiced my concern. "Make sure you have witnesses and don't provoke anything," Jenny advised. I grasped the gravity of her advice. Later that afternoon, there came a knock at the door. True to her promise, Jenny had filed the order of protection, and a courier had just delivered my copy. To bolster my security, I opted to install a small motion-activated camera to monitor the front room. Additionally, I kept a sturdy Louisville Slugger near the front door, just in case. If Ben or his cohorts decided to act on their threats, I needed evidence and a means of defense. Things remained relatively peaceful for the rest of the week. Thankfully, I didn't hear anything from Linda, Simone, or her boyfriends until Saturday night, that is. I was sitting on my balcony nursing a beer and a cigarette when I heard my doorbell. That was followed up by pounding on the door. I ground out my cigarette and went into the front room and looked out the peephole in the door. Sure enough, it was Ben, and I could discern someone with him. As the pounding on the door continued, he shouted for me to open up, claiming I was violating a restraining order. I informed him that I was calling the police, and he protested, yelling for me to open the door. I continued dialing emergency, and when the operator answered, I explained the situation at my door. The operator informed me that they had received multiple calls for that area and dispatched cruisers to my location. They advised against opening the door until the officers arrived, and I thanked them before ending the call. The pounding on the door continued, and I wondered if Ben was going to break it down. Clutching the bat tighter, I waited and heard a commotion. Looking through the peephole, I saw 2 large police officers putting cuffs on Ben and the other man with him. The officer knocked on my door, identifying themselves as police. I opened the door and Ben looked at me as the officer led him back to the cruiser, yelling threats. The officer asked if I knew him, and I nodded, showing him a copy of my trope. He read it, spoke into his radio, and informed me that they would be taking them downtown for the night. I explained my story, and he thanked me for the cooperation, expressing that he didn't think Ben would give me trouble for a while. I closed and locked the door, then returned to my balcony with a fresh beer. The news of Ben's arrest hit the papers the next day, with the headline reading, "Hedge Fund CEO Arrested." Articles revealed that several clients were leaving SG due to the company's involvement in ruining employees' marriages, impacting their bottom line. I thought, good. Returning to work the following Monday. It was challenging, but I managed to get some work done. After about 3 weeks of no contact, I received a call from Jenny. She greeted me and asked how I was holding up. I replied that I was doing as well as could be expected, and they petitioned the court for marriage counseling. The judge had agreed, ordering 6 sessions starting that week. I inquired if they could mandate marriage counseling, and Jenny affirmed that they could. She advised me to attend, explaining that not showing up could result in contempt of court and even jail. I expressed my unwillingness to reconcile with Simone, and Jenny understood but emphasized the importance of my attendance. I reluctantly agreed, and Jenny mentioned that if the counselor perceived no hope for reconciliation, they would inform the judge. I asked if there was anything else, and Jenny revealed that Simone's attorney informed her of Simone's pregnancy. I expressed frustration at the prospect of waiting another 8 or 9 months for any legal actions. Jenny confirmed this delay, adding that if the child is mine, I would be ordered to pay child support. On a positive note, she informed me that the judge approved a legal separation until Simone gives birth. I sarcastically commented, and Jenny provided the counselor's address, wishing me luck. I noted the information on my calendar. I decided that I would make it clear in no uncertain terms there was no way I would ever reconcile with the cheater. When I got to the counselor's office, I was ushered right in. A somewhat older woman looked at me over her glasses. Simone sat across from her in a love seat, looking somewhat forlorn. I had a very bad feeling about this. The counselor, Dr. Abigail Farnsworth, introduced herself and gestured for me to take a seat beside Simone on the love seat. Opting for a smaller wooden chair positioned at a 45-degree angle to the love seat, I made it clear that I felt compelled to be there. Dr. Farnsworth acknowledged my sentiments but expressed gratitude for my presence nonetheless. She then turned to Simone, asking about her aspirations for the sessions. Simone voiced her hope for reconciliation, highlighting the impending arrival of our baby and her desire to restore our family. Reacting with skepticism, I turned to Dr. Farnsworth, sharing my perspective and emphasizing that reconciliation was not on the agenda, casting a glance towards Simone. I noticed Simone recoiling at my statement. Dr. Abigail nodded in response to my statement about not reconciling for the sake of the child. She asked if I would consider it for the child's sake, to which I reiterated my doubt about being the father, and my commitment to support the child if it turned out to be mine. However, I firmly stated that reconciliation with Simone was out of the question. In response to her repeated question about the child's sake, I took out my phone and showed Abigail the videos that were sent to me, hoping to convey the depth of betrayal. She appeared disgusted after watching them, and as I put my phone away, I remarked on her marital status. I questioned how she would feel if the roles were reversed, And it was her husband in those videos, emphasizing the continuous betrayal over more than a year and even in front of her. She insisted that the focus should be on the two of us and the upcoming child. I informed Dr. Abigail that Simone had a child to consider, expressing my doubt about being the father and expressing a desire for answers from Simone. Abigail, after a moment of consideration, nodded and suggested Simone owed me some answers. Simone, looking down and appearing sheepish with a face burning in embarrassment, finally looked up and agreed to provide answers. Abigail then gave me the opportunity to speak, and I turned back to Simone. I inquired if she knew what was going to happen on the night of the party, and she affirmed. I asked if that was the real reason she didn't want me to go, and she admitted it. Reflecting on the terrible experience, I accused them of planning to humiliate me, to which she reluctantly agreed. I further questioned if the intention was to humiliate me even more at Ben's place, and she confirmed it, appearing sheepish. I questioned Simone about the duration of her involvement with the other men at SG, and she admitted it had been ongoing since she joined the company. Puzzled, I asked for the reason behind her actions, to which she casually replied that she enjoyed it, finding it fun, naughty, and exciting, making her feel handsome. When I inquired about the number of men she had been with, excluding me, she nonchalantly mentioned around 4 or 5 dozen. I expressed shock at the revelation, emphasizing the potential risks of venereal diseases. Outraged, I asked if she knew the father of the child she was carrying, and she admitted uncertainty, confronting her expectation for me to raise and financially support the child. I criticized her, stating my lack of love for her anymore and expressing strong resentment, even hoping for a negative outcome. Simone and the others appeared shocked by my words, and Simone seemed on the verge of tears, though my anger remained unabated. In my attempt to inflict more emotional pain, Abigail intervened, signaling that I had made my point. I rejected the notion that I was discarding 5 good years of marriage, attributing the breakdown to Simone's infidelity. I contested the characterization of our marriage as 5 good years, emphasizing that the last year wasn't genuine. Following Simone's confession of involvement with 48 to 60 men and doubts regarding the paternity of her child, Dr. Abigail concluded the session, expressing her intention to hold individual sessions with each of us before deciding on the next course of action. We scheduled our appointments for the following week and departed. In the parking lot, Simone called out to me, but I ignored her and proceeded to my car. As I drove away, I glimpsed Simone sobbing over her steering wheel, and a sense of satisfaction washed over me, deeming it a fitting consequence for her actions. Later that night, I received a furious call from Linda, blaming me for Simone's distress. She informed me that Simone was hospitalized due to an incident and accused me of mistreating her. I defended myself, asserting that I merely spoke the truth, juxtaposing it with Simone's behavior over the past year, to which I responded with indifference. She criticized me as a loser and emphasized that I should at least provide insurance information, as Simone was still legally my wife, and I would be responsible for the bills. After a moment of reflection, I decided to visit Simone in the hospital, acknowledging the information Jenny had shared earlier. Linda provided me with the room details, and upon arrival, I approached the nurse, providing my insurance information, and briefly discussing Simone's condition with the doctor. I inquired about the cause of the mishap, to which the doctor explained the complexities of pregnancies, leaving the specific cause uncertain. Curious about the duration of the pregnancy, I learned that Simone was approximately 9 or 10 weeks along, leaving a possibility that the child could have been mine. Nevertheless, I considered it inconsequential, as the mishap signaled the opportunity to proceed with the divorce. After inquiring about Simone's well-being from the doctor, who assured me she would be fine, I entered her room. She appeared distressed in the bed, tears in her eyes. Linda, positioned at the end of the bed, expressed her displeasure, to which I responded with a growl, causing her to retreat from the room. Facing Simone, I acknowledged the finality of our relationship. She questioned whether I truly hated her as much as I had claimed earlier, and I admitted that, at that moment, the intensity had lessened. However, I emphasized that reconciliation was out of the question, given the breach of trust she had demonstrated. Expressing my frustration, I conveyed how each trip she made to the store left me wondering if she was involved with the checkout clerks. I questioned the sudden turn of disrespect, emphasizing that I had treated her exceptionally well throughout our years together. She denied any wrongdoing on my part, and acknowledged my role as a devoted husband and lover. However, I countered, stating that if that were the case, she would have resisted the advances of others. She admitted succumbing to the influence of others who claimed that it was normal for husbands to witness their wives with other men. I dismissed her explanation, emphasizing that the divorce was inevitable and any attempts to salvage the relationship were futile. In response to my decision, she tearfully accepted, agreeing to inform her lawyer the next day. I sternly clarified that any hopes of friendship were unrealistic. Despite her apologies, I remained resolute in my decision to end the marriage. I looked at her for a few moments. "Yeah," I said as I started to leave her room. "Goodbye, Simone." I could hear her cry as I walked away. Tough luck, I thought. Good riddance. A few days later, I received a call from Jenny. True to her promise, Simone abandoned all objections to the divorce. Abigail's report concluded that reconciliation was unattainable and recommended anger management for me. This suggestion was echoed by the judge, although it wasn't mandated by the court. Jenny successfully negotiated settlements from SG funds, as well as from Ben and Dale, although it fell short of a court order. Approximately a month later, Jenny handed me a substantial check, the largest I had ever received, minus her fee, of course. "Certainly," I replied as I deposited the check and moved forward with my life, or what was left of it. SG, or Sodom and Gomorrah as I often referred to it, closed its doors about 6 months later, seemingly due to a loss of trust in the company's financial integrity by its clients. Wonder why? I cynically mused to myself. Ben and Dale remained silent after that incident at the apartment. Both served a 30-day stint in the county jail for their stunt and seemed keen on avoiding a repeat, with their reputations tarnished in the community. They sought a fresh start on the West Coast. Simone and Linda continued sharing the same apartment, transitioning to employment in a strip mall retail store specializing in women's clothing and cosmetics. I encountered them occasionally but never acknowledged their presence. Remaining single, I casually dated over the next couple of years. Eventually, I met Claire Hansen, a recent divorcee, and we embarked on a slow and easy dating journey for a few months. She had experienced the pain of infidelity in her previous marriage. Understanding her hurt, I provided all the support I could. In the initial weeks, our activities revolved around conversations or outings for dinner and a movie. Recognizing her vulnerability, I took the time to engage in comforting activities such as holding hands and enjoying leisurely strolls through the park. Despite finding her attractive, I opted to let her take the lead. After a delightful dinner at her condo, she observed me with a curious intensity, questioning whether I found her appealing. Responding with a smile, I assured her of my attraction, stating that it extended beyond physical aspects. Curious about my lack of initiative, she playfully inquired if I liked girls. My response conveyed a positive outlook on the situation. Second story, my wife cheats on me with my dad. Hello everyone. I never write on Reddit, but I need to vent and share a situation that has left me very confused and sad. I have discovered a family secret that has rocked me and has me at an emotional crossroads. For a decade, my wife and I have shared a marriage filled with love and what I believe to be unbreakable strength. Lately, though, her behavior has taken a peculiar turn. Clandestine phone calls, mysterious messages, and unaccounted for late-night ventures, all accompanied by an inexplicable aloofness. Initially, I attributed it to work-related stress or perhaps personal challenges, but as time passed, uncertainty crept into my mind. One day, I came home unexpectedly and found my wife in a compromising situation with my father. The scene left me stunned, a mix of pain, confusion, and disbelief. I couldn't find the words. I just managed to leave the house and wander the streets aimlessly. The following hours were torment. How was it possible that the people I loved the most were hiding something so big from me? What had I done to deserve this? In the end, I returned home and confronted my wife. She, amidst tears and pleas, confessed everything. The relationship with my father had started months ago, in secret, fueled by a forbidden passion that consumed them. I cannot deny that I felt immense pain, a betrayal that hit me to the core. My world has been shaken. My family has become a scene of uncertainty. I don't know what to do, who to turn to. I have thought about divorce, but the idea of breaking my marriage fills me with sadness. I love my wife, despite everything. And although my father's betrayal disgusts me, I cannot deny the affection I still have for him. I feel trapped in a web of lies and secrets. I don't know how to move forward, how to rebuild my life after this devastating revelation. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.